help you with this. As far as I can tell, every gay man is filled with murderous rage. This rage is energy turned foul and stored up in us as we're forced, starting in childhood, to undergo anti-gayness. Our rage is the child of our impotence and suffering, of our fear. Unless we deal with it directly and usefully, it serves anti-gayness. It fuels our self-destruction, the ruthless, shallow, backbiting, suicidal rip-off tendencies in gay culture. But this hate can just as well power our beauty and strength if it's harnessed to our vision. In fact, you can become a great champion of healing in the world. All people have this potential to be reverse Hitlers. To see this is to see your Roika. To follow it is to become an alchemist, transmuting foulness into wisdom. In my previous essay, I spent much space describing the gay vision. Let me then just briefly summarize it here. Gayness is the power and potential to cross the rainbow bridge to the androgyne door I've called yang. Those who do this transform themselves, become wise and powerful sorcerers, helping others do the same. This is Roika, the faggot warrior's path. Faggot was not meant in the meaning of his whole community, sub-community, but gay men called themselves faggots. Back then when I was a local of that scene. The faggot warrior's path. The faggot warrior stands in two realms. He both lives in and struggles to gain the end result of his practice, a world of total justice, compassion, beauty, equality, pleasure, and grace, where all people come together to actualize our finest potentials. For we're currently as far from our true humanity as we are from the other animals. Western societies are the pits of waste, exploitation, alienation, and inhumanity. This is a far cry from our true being, which is the utopian dream come true. A new age, a complete change in all current forms of society, a complete change in what it means to be human. We gay people have been put in an important place on humanity's path toward this goal at this time. Edward Carpenter, the great gay visionary, was one of the first to notice this publicly when he wrote in 1919 that gay people, quote, point to a further degree of evolution than usually attained, and a higher order of consciousness, unquote. That's from Intermediate Types on Primitive Folk. Each of us knows about our gay gift in some way or other. This knowing, this vision, even if unconscious, is our doorway into it. This doorway I've called Roika Yang. We each step through it in our own way. Every faggot's path is unique. Indeed, you create your own path as much as it creates you. You create Roika as you find and follow it. In fact, it never even existed until you made it. Likewise, you create here and there and the rainbow bridge between them. You are the ultimate mother and father. Even the spirit is your child. For those of you who think I'm bullshitting, I refer you to Jane Roberts' Seth books. This really dates Seth books, Seth which recount how a woman becomes a medium for a being from there. This being called Seth and tells us his views on here, there, space, time, consciousness, and human evolution. I find that many ideas in the Seth books parallel my own, but are much clearer and more detailed. Her books went hundreds of pages. Of course, you may find Seth or Jane Roberts to be bullshitting too. But you'll discover on reading the Seth books that he says some things which may seem unreal, far-fetched, weird, nonsensical, or even crazy. For example, in Seth Speaks, he says to us that, quote, you create physical objects as surely as you create words, unquote. And he adds that, quote, it is only by comprehending the nature of this constant translation of thoughts and desires into physical objects that you can realize your true independence from circumstance, time, and environment, unquote. Many people, I'm sure, won't accept this opinion. I often have trouble with it myself. Yet there's so much we're still ignorant of. It seems to me there's a group of beings who watch over our planet. There's a group. Well, okay, groups of beings in the last day you're a little bit long. It seems to me there's a group of beings who watch over our planet and help guide us to become as they are. They're very old and wise. They were here before our planet even appeared and participated in the birth and evolution of life on Earth. They have spoken to us in every culture throughout the ages, sometimes appearing in our own physical form, at other times helping secretly. You can hear their messages in many famous people, such as the Buddha and Isis. The more we evolve, the more clearly we can hear them. They reach across the rainbow bridge to us, helping us to see and walk across it. I don't think I'm the best medium for these messages. I certainly haven't crossed the bridge all the way yet. But in a dim-witted way, I've heard something that I've willingly agreed to send along. Someone has told me it's time to act, that many gay men are ready to get down into their gifts and blaze up in joyous power, in full strided purpose with an urn of grace and beauty. Faggots are ready to be hot stuff, so get off your cited gas. I only have one message for you. Sometimes megalomania butts in and confuses things, and so I ask you to excuse my frequent foolishness. Remember yourself. All my words, this entire essay, are aimed at this one thing. Remember. And the way to do it is by asking yourself, quote, who am I, unquote. For me, this is the key, the best way to discover everything. Following the supreme wisdom, always asking, answering, and asking this question will take you where you want to go. Just do it all the time. Who am I? You'll find it gets easy. Story of my life. I'm reminded as I sit here writing how strange it sometimes sounds to me. Though I've trained myself to write, quote, good, unquote, essays, it's really hard work and I'd rather be talking with you in person right now. For in order to understand what I say, you must know something about me. I was born on 1/1851 in Culver City, California, which is a few miles down the hill here. I am 6'3" and skinny, which is still I'm part white, part Cherokee, usually have fairly long, unkempt, dark brown hair, so accumulating and a beard, so I'm trim on. Sometimes I imagine I have cancer. That may sound familiar. Was raised in a lower class home where used clothing, live a semi-alone life in San Francisco, sharing an apartment with a dyke, which is where I was living at the time. I'm a faggot and I work in a frog factory. Believe it or not, I call myself a faggot and I worked in a frog factory, with frogs. There was a time before I knew it, but I kid you. I lived off food stamps and working with the frogs. I put their eyes on. I put the eyes on the frogs and instead give them character. They were very anonymous. They put their eyes on. But you put their eyes on, they really spoke. It became very personal then. And I would spend hours putting the eyes and hundreds of beanbag frogs. They were beanbags. That sounds pleasure fair. Okay. There was a time before I knew much about work and the spirit of the Rainbow Bridge, and now by I mean by ego, since other parts of me have always been very wise. Voices spoke to me and they got me to wake up. One of the earliest I remember hearing one day when I was 13 years old and walking across the street to eat lunch in the school cafeteria. The voice said, "You are homosexual." Remember the incident? I was walking across the street to eat lunch, and it was a hazy day, like here sometimes here in LA. It was kind of vague clouds, and all of a sudden it's like something spoke through the clouds. "You are a homosexual." This was a devastating message at the time because I didn't want to be homosexual. I remember looking around, and no one else I could tell. It was like in those cartoons or cliches. No one else was hearing anything. It was like this voice spoke to me. It was awful. But from then on, I had to confront this issue consciously. It made me take the first step out of the closet and into myself. Another voice came to me right after I turned 18 and told me I was in love with a classmate in school. This was the first time I was ever, quote, in love, unquote, and it had quite an effect on me. To understand why, you should know that I grew up in a very cold, loveless family. For me to feel love in this environment was so hard that I usually felt great pain instead. So at an early age, I took all my love and locked it so deep inside me that I didn't even know I had any. So you can imagine that suddenly to feel and recognize love came as a great revelation to me. It thrust me vividly out of my cold ego reality, completely upsetting the personality I'd so carefully built up over the years. I was suddenly love-struck, instantly transported to gardens of delight by a shy blonde football player, co-student of mine in high school. I finally worked up the nerve to tell this boy I was in love with him. He, however, didn't appreciate finding out about it. Underspeak. In fact, he was stunned by the foulness he saw in it. And through his reaction, I reached another revelation, that I couldn't continue in my crazy closet world. This led directly to, quote, confessing, unquote, my gayness to one friend, and then to a teacher, and then to a shrink. I hoped a shrink would make me straight. But after 1.5 years with him, I fell in love with another man, and I realized love was actually good. I quit my shrink and started on the path of accepting and becoming myself, which took me finally to the spirit and realization of my destiny. Maybe I could go on. It recounts other incidents. You see, I'm getting very personal, and it goes on like this, because the things I'm talking about as ideas, I don't want to do what many do. As you know, you've all been to school, you've all been to universities, you all know intellectuals, people who know their thoughts and ideas, but they're disconnected in their own bodies. And actually being connected in one's own body is the hardest thing. It sounds simple if I just say it, but to actually do it, the way I'm talking with you here, you see what I'm doing is I'm talking about myself, I'm talking about my history, as I'm talking about the ideas I'm grappling with. And I'm trying to integrate them. I already know how to do this privately, in my own person. Now I'm trying to do it in writing or publicly or with organizing. And thus it's become political in a more community sense, or extrovert sense, as well as introverted. Eventually it's the same motion that causes this institute, and eventually it sponsors this club and this training program and things to come about. Because this is actually this way that being pushed on me that I haven't discovered in order to just be authentic. This way that I learned about from Don Clark, but now I have to follow it out because of what it's telling me to do. It's not easy to do. In fact, I found personally it's the hardest thing to do. It's the hardest thing to be authentic. It's easy to be hypocritical. And I'm not trying to speak as someone who's only authentic versus being hypocritical, but rather as I relate to my own hypocrisies, I get more familiar with them and more able to be integrative rather than hypocritical in my actions and doings with myself and in the world. And so I'm sharing a little from like 1980, from that introduction, now from 1977, a few years beforehand. It has legitimate spiritual and mystical qualities to it that I can still feel now. Okay, but when it's being born, this kind of way of doing gay-centered inner work, is more accurately how I describe it now. You see this way I'm describing it. I'm trying to make sure I include both the personal and also these mystical aspects of the symbols I'm encountering in my experience as I attempt to be gay, or what that word is referring to, since the words don't matter in the end. I am entering a zone as I work with my subjectivity that more and more so leaves the relevance of words and concepts behind. That more and more can experience larger experiences than encompassed by any words or by any concepts, no matter what they are. That larger world is what I call symbolism, of which all words and all concepts are part, but which includes much more than words and concepts. It includes everything. Everything we experience is symbolic, is what I've discovered. At first I thought this was to discover it and understand it was shamanism. You have to be shamanic to understand it and grapple with it successfully. And I still hold to that view, but I wouldn't call it shamanic. It means to understand one's own psyche, learn to have a satisfactory relationship, and there are various metaphorical ways that can be described, or theoretical ways, or terminological ways that I look at it in a utilitarian way now. What can be useful, what can be helpful. So you can see I'm still with the spirit, as I could get into the materials I was reading into you. I'm still with the spirit that I had discovered me back then. And it happened in that way that gradually I share in the writings themselves aspects of how that came to be as it continues to develop. And now it's still to this point here. Remember reading you this kooky old thing on this kooky obscure Saturday night in early February for a couple hours. Otherwise, it's just silent text on a page and dead dust. Well, this is interesting. Thank you very much. You're a very patient audience, and that's great that we've been able to open up and see how things go for a while. Now I see we still have a little bit more time. We have to be out of here pretty strictly because they're really ferocious around not liking us if we go past 9:30. So, but I noticed that we're not right at that point here. So we have a little bit more time. And I always like to give a chance, if I'm the one presenting or managing that in this kind of event, I like to give us a little chance to be more of a community with this than just I'm the one who's yakking and you're the ones who are listening.